Imagine yourself in one of those moments when everything seems to be in place, where life is flowing at the rhythm you've always planned. Success, achievements, everything is there, exactly where it should be. But in an instant, something unexpected happens and shows us just how fragile we really are. It's in these moments that we realize, no matter how much we build a life filled with accomplishments, we're human, vulnerable. And often what truly saves us is not what we've achieved, but the people who come into our lives when we least expect it, those who remind us of what really matters. This is the story of Jason, a man who, amidst his own greatness, found in a moment of desperation what he never expected, someone who would save him in ways he could never imagine. It all begins as a subtle discomfort but quickly turns into something relentless, a terrible pressure that shoots through his left arm and tightens his jaw. Jason knows what's happening. At 37, he's faced health challenges before, but never with such intensity. Too weak to ignore it, he tries to reach for the phone to call for help. Every step becomes a struggle, every second feels like an eternity, and then, everything goes dark. In the hallway, Jasmine Brooks, the hotel maid, goes about her usual work. Pushing her cleaning cart with precision, she's focused on the routine that keeps her occupied and grounded. Jasmine was once a nurse, someone who mastered the art of saving lives with steady hands, but now she devotes herself to cleaning and organizing, facing each day with the same dedication. As Jasmine approaches Jason's suite, a strange sound makes her pause. Something within her, perhaps the instinct that never left her, alerts her. She knocks on the door, calling out once, twice, but there's no response. Without hesitation, Jasmine uses the master key and enters. And then she sees him, Jason, collapsed on the floor, pale, without signs of life. Her heart races. She knows what she must do. Without thinking twice, she picks up the phone and calls for emergency services, her voice firm and controlled as she quickly describes the situation. Jasmine kneels beside Jason, unbuttons his shirt to ease his breathing, and begins chest compressions. Each movement is precise, as if she's back in her past. With steady hands and a determined heart, she breathes air into his lungs, trying to revive his breath. The scent of her perfume, a blend of vanilla and jasmine, fills the room, creating a calm atmosphere amid the chaos. Minutes pass, and Jasmine keeps hope alive. The sound of sirens announces the arrival of the paramedics, but she doesn't stop the compressions until they're ready to take over. Before leaving, one of the paramedics touches her shoulder and says, "You did well. We'll take it from here." Jasmine breathes a sigh of relief, though exhausted, watching as they take Jason to the hospital. When the paramedics finally took Jason, Jasmine stayed there, still kneeling, breathing deeply as she tried to sort through the whirlwind of emotions inside her. The silence of the suite resumed, as if everything around her returned to calm. Yet something inside Jasmine resisted that serenity. Those intense moments had left a mark on her mind and heart. She had just saved a life, but even with all her nursing experience, she had never felt this need to know more about the person she had helped. There was something about that man that made her want to know if he would be okay. As soon as she caught her breath and gathered her things, Jasmine walked to the front desk. She tried to mask her curiosity, but the question slipped out. "Do you know who the guest in the presidential suite is, the gentleman, the one who just took ill?" The receptionist looked at her cautiously, hesitating for a moment before answering. It wasn't common for staff to inquire about guests, especially those in the presidential suite. But Jasmine persisted, disguising her unease a bit more. She couldn't exactly explain why, but this man didn't seem like just another guest. "He's Mr. Jason Carrington," the receptionist revealed, watching Jasmine with discreet curiosity. "An automotive industry magnate." Jasmine needed a moment to absorb that information. Jason Carrington. She had heard of him in magazines and on the news. He was a powerful figure, someone who, in the eyes of the world, seemed almost untouchable. It started to sink in, and the more she reflected, the more fascinated she became. How could someone so powerful be so vulnerable? And the image of his pale face, his labored breathing, his eyes closed as she fought to bring his breath back. That memory made her feel something she simply couldn't ignore. But the information wasn't enough. Jasmine needed to know how he was doing, whether he had truly overcome the critical moment. Something in her heart, an impulse she couldn't resist, told her she had to continue. It was as if, by saving Jason, she had taken on an invisible responsibility for him, and that feeling pushed her to go further. So, with the little information she had, she decided to take a chance. She left work as soon as her shift ended and headed straight to the hospital where the paramedics had taken him. When she arrived, She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of apprehension and purpose. The white lights in the hospital reception greeted her with the typical coldness of a medical environment, but Jasmine wasn't intimidated. She approached the counter and with her usual polite tone asked, "Good evening. Mr. Jason Carrington was admitted here, right? Could you inform me about his condition?" The hospital receptionist looked up from her computer screen, and upon seeing Jasmine standing there, so simple and calm, she hesitated. And who would like to know?" she asked, visibly surprised by the request, especially given the profile of the patient in question. Jasmine paused for a moment, feeling the receptionist's critical gaze. "I'm just someone who helped him at the hotel. I wanted to know if he's okay," she replied with an honest and gentle tone that surprised the receptionist. After a brief pause, the receptionist nodded, realizing Jasmine wasn't there out of unnecessary curiosity, but genuine concern. "He's in the ICU, under observation. He hasn't had any family visitors yet." Those words tightened Jasmine's chest. Even someone as influential as Jason Carrington was alone at that moment. She felt an even greater urge to look out for him, even from a distance, and she promised herself that while he was recovering, she would visit him, even if discreetly, just to know if he would be okay. Each time she finished work, she returned to the hospital, waiting for news, always in silence, without expecting recognition. That simple act of saving a life seemed to have created an unexpected connection between her and Jason. There was no logical explanation for it, but Jasmine felt that, as he fought to recover, she was there too, supporting him with her thoughts, her quiet presence in the hospital. She knew he would probably never know who had saved his life, but for Jasmine, it was enough to know that Jason Carrington, a man so powerful and isolated, was not truly alone. Over time, Jason slowly began to regain consciousness, as if emerging from a deep, heavy sleep. After a few days of recovery in the hospital, he was strong enough to return to the Grand Royale Hotel, where he would continue his rehabilitation. In those first days back at the Grand Royale, Jason Carrington found himself in a mix of physical fragility and emotional impatience. He was a man used to control, to independence. The idea of being vulnerable, of needing help for even the simplest tasks, frustrated him deeply. His memories of the heart attack were still fragmented, and he struggled to piece his thoughts together. All he had were flashes of memory and a feeling that seemed to come from nowhere, the soft scent of vanilla and jasmine, which brought him an inexplicable sense of calm. One morning, as Jason was walking down the hotel hallway toward the elevator, he had his first encounter with Jasmine since his return. She was focused on her work, arranging a cart filled with fresh towels. Her hair was tied back in a bun, and her focused expression showed a quiet seriousness. As soon as she noticed Jason approaching, her heart began to race. This was the man she had saved, the man whose progress she had quietly followed with hope during his recovery days. When their eyes met, Jasmine offered a soft smile, a genuine reflection of her relief in seeing him well. She opened her mouth to greet him, maybe to say something kind, but Jason didn't give her a chance. He looked her up and down, frowning with a displeased expression. "Could you please move that cart out of the hallway?" he said impatiently, looking away. "What would a guest think seeing it here?" Jasmine froze, the surprise replacing the smile on her lips. She had imagined this moment many times, the reunion with the man she had saved. And never, not for a second, did she imagine he would treat her with such arrogance. Her face twisted into a look of sadness, but she tried to hide it. After all, he didn't know who she was. To him, she was just a maid. With a respectful nod, Jasmine pulled the cart to the side without saying a word, though her heart was heavy. She felt a strange connection to him, one that went beyond the moment she saved him. But now, that feeling seemed to crumble, mixed with frustration and disappointment. She watched Jason walk away, and with slightly teary eyes, left the hallway. As Jason continued on his way, something unexpected happened. The soft scent of vanilla and jasmine lingered in the air, suspended like a delicate echo. He paused for a moment, sensing the aroma that felt vaguely familiar. It was the same scent that accompanied him in the memory of that critical day, something he could barely understand but that evoked a sense of peace. It sparked in him a nearly involuntary curiosity. Jason stopped in the middle of the hallway, trying to connect the dots. The memory of that perfume took him back to the hospital, to the moment he had fought to hold on to life. A persistent question rose in his mind: who was that woman? And why did he feel as though she was somehow connected to what had happened? He continued on his way, but the memory of that scent wouldn't leave him. There was a lingering feeling, a need to uncover what had truly happened that day. It was as if a piece was missing, and he wouldn't be at peace until he filled that gap. Upon reaching his suite, Jason made a decision. He had to find out who had helped him on the day of his heart attack. Determined to solve the mystery, he went down to the reception and requested the security footage from the day of his collapse. The staff hesitated, but given his status as a VIP guest, they granted his request. In the monitoring room, Jason watched the screen intently, his eyes fixed, with each passing second building his anticipation. The footage finally showed the moment when the suite door opened, and there she was. The maid he had just encountered in the hallway, the same one he'd treated with impatience, entered quickly, her eyes locked on him, her stance determined. Jason held his breath. She knelt beside him and, without hesitation, began to perform resuscitation. The intensity of the moment was captured in each movement. The precision, the care, the strength with which she pressed his chest while he lay there, between life and death. He felt a surge of mixed emotions, shock, surprise, and an admiration he couldn't quite define. With each second he watched, Jasmine's figure grew larger, more significant. She wasn't just a maid. She was his savior. And he, with all his arrogance, had treated her coldly, without even realizing the connection that existed between them. Jason looked away from the screen for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. He felt deeply moved, regretful for how he had treated her, and filled with a gratitude he had never experienced before. At that moment, he knew he had to make it right. More than that, he needed to meet her, to look her in the eyes, and thank her from the bottom of his heart. Jason stood in the monitoring room, still trying to process everything he had just seen. Jasmine, the maid he had treated with impatience and disdain, was the person who had given him a second chance at life. He was overwhelmed by a mix of guilt and gratitude, unable to shake the weight of his regret. How could he have been so blind? How could he have been so arrogant when this woman had risked so much to help him? Determined to make things right, he set out to find Jasmine. He moved through the hotel, discreetly asking staff where he could find her. Finally, he was told she was in the service room, organizing cleaning supplies. As he opened the door, Jason saw her with her back turned, focused, adjusting her uniform and folding a few towels. For a moment, he hesitated. Apologizing was not something he was used to. In his position, it was rare he ever had to. But he knew this time was different. He took a deep breath, preparing himself, and then walked in. "Jasmine," he called in a softer tone than usual, without his usual authoritative firmness. She turned around, surprised, and upon seeing Jason there, became immediately alert. Her face showed surprise, but also a hint of caution. She wasn't sure what to expect from this man who, days before, had treated her with coldness and arrogance. "Yes, Mr. Carrington," she replied professionally, steadying her nerves. Jason took a step forward, his expression sincere and touched with a vulnerability he rarely showed. He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, Jasmine saw a glimmer of humility in the man who had previously shown only indifference. I need to thank you," he began, trying to find the right words, and of course to apologize. "I know I was rude to you in the hallway, and now I know that you were the person who saved my life. I can't imagine what would have happened to me if it weren't for you." His words echoed through the quiet room, and Jasmine felt her heart race. She hadn't expected him to know the truth, let alone to be there to apologize and thank her. She tried to stay calm, but her eyes betrayed her with an emotion she couldn't hide. "I just did what I thought needed to be done, Mr. Carrington," she replied, steadying her voice, still surprised by his presence. Jason shook his head, noting the modesty in her response. "No, Jasmine. It wasn't just that. You went beyond your duty. You chose to stay by my side, to fight for my life, when you could have just called for help. And I was a fool. I treated you as if you didn't matter, not knowing that you were the reason I'm alive right now." She took a deep breath, feeling a wave of relief and at the same time satisfaction at hearing those words. Jasmine held immense respect for her work and the values she carried, but she never imagined that a man like Jason Carrington would recognize the worth of her actions. It was clear that his gratitude came from the heart. "I didn't expect this, Mr. Carrington. I just wanted to help, you know? I wasn't expecting anything in return. When I saw you there, I knew I had to do something. It was that simple." Jasmine gave a gentle smile, revealing the kindness that was characteristic of her. Jason couldn't help but smile back, struck by her simplicity and sincerity. He took another step forward, now close enough to see the depth in Jasmine's eyes. "I'll never be able to repay what you did for me, but, if you'll allow me, I'd like to try. And more than anything, I'd like to know more about you, about the extraordinary person who saved my life." Jasmine felt her cheeks flush. She had never expected that the powerful and distant Jason Carrington, a man surrounded by luxury and opulence, would show such interest in her. Hesitantly, she looked away for a moment, trying to absorb what he was saying. When she looked back at him, she realized he wasn't there out of formality. He truly wanted to know her, to understand the woman who, with a selfless act, had changed the course of his life. I don't know what to say. "I think you've caught me by surprise," Jasmine admitted, with a shy smile. Jason observed her for a moment, feeling an inexplicable warmth. What began as a search for answers was turning into something deeper. He realized this was the beginning of a journey that went beyond gratitude and apologies. "How about we start with a coffee?" he suggested, a gentle warmth lighting up his face. "No formalities, no protocols. Just two people talking." Jasmine remained silent for a moment, taking in the invitation. There was something about him that made her feel an unusual sense of trust, a desire to accept. She nodded, a subtle smile appearing on her face. "I think I'd like that, Jason." He smiled content, and the two walked out together, moving through the hotel's corridors, ready to explore a connection that already felt inevitable. In the days and weeks that followed, Jason and Jasmine began spending more time together. The simple coffee they'd shared that afternoon at the hotel became a daily ritual, a time when they exchanged stories and shared pieces of their lives that otherwise might never have intersected. With each conversation, Jason felt that Jasmine's world was a universe of its own, filled with simple yet profound stories, moments that didn't involve luxury but held a wisdom he'd never found in anyone else. As time went on, Jason fully recovered, his health returning to normal. But the most significant change in his life wasn't physical. He was no longer the same man he had been before the heart attack. Something within him had shifted, not just because of the second chance he'd been given, but because of the woman who now played a part in his life in a way he had never imagined. Jasmine had come into his life like a miracle, a presence he somehow felt was meant to be there. Each day, he found himself more captivated by her. Jasmine didn't have experience with the luxury and opulence Jason was accustomed to, but she brought something he now realized had always been missing from his life: authenticity and simplicity. With her, Jason began to discover the value of a life measured not by wealth or corporate achievements, but by moments, sincerity, and true connections. They strolled through the hotel gardens, and as Jason's strength returned, he invited her to visit places she had never seen before. But what surprised Jason was that no matter where they went, Jasmine always led him to connect with what was essential, with what truly mattered. With her, he felt as though he was seeing the world for the first time, rediscovering beauty in small things, in what had always been there but that he'd never allowed himself to see. As his feelings for Jasmine deepened, Jason began to realize she filled a space in his life he hadn't even known existed. For the first time, he had found someone who wasn't interested in his wealth or status. Jasmine saw him for who he was, beyond the business mogul, beyond appearances. She made him feel human, vulnerable, and at the same time, more alive than ever. For her part, Jasmine hadn't expected that the powerful and reserved man she had saved would become such an important presence in her life. Jason treated her with a respect and admiration that surprised her, and she felt that with him, she could be who she truly was without pretense. And over time, she began to realize that their worlds, although different, completed each other in an almost magical way. And then, on a calm evening, as they walked through the hotel garden, Jason stopped and looked into Jasmine's eyes. The sun cast a gentle light on her, and he felt he had never seen a more perfect scene. "Jasmine, you're the reason I'm here today, and since you came into my life, everything has changed." He held her hands tenderly and continued, "I never imagined that, besides someone so different from me, I could feel complete. You've shown me a life that no amount of money could ever give me. You've taught me to appreciate what I always overlooked. And now, I realize that I don't want to go on with this life without you." She looked at him, surprised yet deeply moved, and smiled, her eyes reflecting the same tenderness he felt. "Jason, I never imagined I would find someone like you either. I thought our connection would be fleeting, just a brief encounter. But life showed me it was more than that. I'm here by your side, and I see that together we've found something we didn't even know we were looking for." Jason embraced her, taking in the familiar scent of vanilla and jasmine, which transported him back to the moment when everything had started. Right there, he understood that his second chance at life wasn't just physical. It was an opportunity to reconnect with his own humanity and to build a new life alongside someone who made him feel more whole than any wealth had ever been able to provide. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms in the garden, in silence, knowing that this moment sealed something far stronger than words could express. Life had united two different worlds in an unexpected way, and they now knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. And so, by Jasmine's side, Jason found a new purpose, a new chance to live, not measured by achievements in business but by moments of love and authenticity. Together, they embarked on a journey where, at last, he had found what he'd always been searching for without knowing it, a true love and the peace that only simplicity and human connection can offer. If this story touched you, please like it and share it with someone special. And of course, subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Thanks for watching and see you next time.